Story is it's set in 1937 at around just before Orson Welles is going to put on the production of Julius Caesar, or Caesar, Death of a Dictator as he called it, at the Mercury Theatre in New York. And Zac Efron is nominally the star of the movie. Zac Efron plays this young kid who's got these aspirations of finding an artistic life. He's walking along the street. He ships up outside the Mercury Theatre where, by a strange coincidence, they decide that they need a ukulele player. He says, yes, I can play the ukulele. Next thing, fine, you're in. You've got a small role playing the boy who plays the song in Julius Caesar, or Caesar. Therefore spends a couple of weeks in the company of Orson Welles putting on what then became, as you probably know, a very, very famous production of Caesar, which was set in fascist Italy. It was about the rise of Hitler and Mussolini. It was very, very political, and it was pretty much the thing that everyone remembers as Orson Welles' great stage triumph, because it's shocking and terrifying and really sort of uniquely different. He cut the whole text down to 90 minutes and basically made it about the thing that he wanted it to be about. So the problem with any Orson Welles movie is, can you find somebody who can do Orson Welles? And I don't just mean do Orson Welles like do an impression of Orson Welles, because everybody can do, probably the best logger in the world, and obviously I can't do it. But they found this guy.
What, you mean an impression of yours that isn't slightly accurate?
Yeah. Can you do Orson Welles?
No, but I wouldn't even try.
Go on, have a go.
No.
Demek Sherry. No, it's not like that, though, is it? It's got to... Anyway, I can't do it, but what they did was they found this guy, Christian McKay. He was out doing a one-man show about...
In a world
of Orson Welles, he was Zac Efron. And they found this guy doing a one-man show, but as an old Welles with a strap-on fat suit. And they went... And apparently Richard Linklater, who directed Slacker and directed School of Rock, so he's not perhaps the guy you would expect to be doing this, except, of course, Linklater says that Welles was one of the first indie filmmakers, and in a way he was right. Took one look at him and went, that's the guy. Here is Christian McKay being Welles. And I have to tell you right now, I've seen a lot of people do Welles on screen. Schreiber, and is it Vincent D'Onofrio does him in Ed Wood. There's a lot of people have had a bash at Welles. This is the definitive Welles.
I am Orson Welles, and every single one of you stands here as an adjunct to my vision. You want a career in the Mercury Theatre and in everything else I plan to do? Then remember one simple rule. I own the store. You don't like the way I work here? There's the door. Find somebody else to star you on Broadway. We open tomorrow. I'm proud of every member of this company. Every single one of you has come through. You're a magnificent company, on par with any theatrical company in the world. And after tomorrow, every literate person in this city is going to know who we are. They'll be lining up for the privilege of seeing our work. Now let's run through it again.
He does that thing that Sir Anthony Hopkins does when he's doing Nixon, which is that although he doesn't actually look like Nixon, he somehow pulls his shoulders and puts his chin out in a certain way that makes him he has the physical resemblance without actually looking anything like him. Well, in the case of Christian McKay, he does the thing that Welles did with his eyebrows, but it's not just somebody doing an impersonation. It's
what
not...
was it that he did with his eyebrows?
Well, I can't do it, but Welles had a very sort of... the incredibly famous shot in The Third Man when the camera comes down and finds him coming out. It's one of the most famous shots in cinema. You do know the one. You will have seen it.
What are his eyebrows doing?
Well, I can't do it, because if I could, I would be Welles. Plus, it's radio.
It.
Well, essentially, he slightly sort of furrows his brow, but his brow doesn't crease in the way that anyone... And it's like one goes up and one goes slightly down, and he looks at you quizzically. And the sense that you have from the Orson Welles look is that he's looking at you, laughing at you, agreeing with you, knowing what you're thinking, and thinking all those things, and thinking that in that moment you're the person he wants to be talking to, but he's got the better of you anyway.
Damn,
at least that's what I think Orson Welles does with his eyebrows. Those are very expressive eyebrows, and Christian McKay does the same thing. If I was Linklater and I was doing this movie, because Linklater wanted to do it for a while because he's got a thing about Orson Welles, and who hasn't got a thing about Orson Welles? And it literally, I'd love to have been there at the moment when he sort of just went, that's it, we're home dry. Honestly, if nothing else works in the movie, if we get that guy on screen doing that, we are absolutely home and dry. So that's the first point. Second point is, there's so much else to like in the film. It's difficult for it not to be kind of overshadowed by that. Second point is Zac Efron, who I'm a big fan of Zac Efron. Zac Efron, some people kind of raised their eyebrows, not in an Orson Welles quizzical way, but in a kind of critical way about Zac Efron doing effectively what's a serious role. Although there is a romantic comedy element within the thing. It seems to me there's a terrible snobbery now about anyone who comes out of song and dance background. Zac Efron can sing and dance. We know that from the High School Musical things. He moves like Fred Astaire. That guy walks like a proper song and dance man. And for me, I thought the casting was really clever because it's a period piece. It's set in the 1930s when a leading man would have that kind of skill. You look at old 1930s movies, you never had people on screen who could just stand and talk. I mean, ever since, Robert De Niro redefined screen acting with The Method, which meant mumbling and eating some pies for a while, that's, all that thing about what proper old acting skills are, like being able to tap dance, being able to juggle, being able to play the ukulele and stand on your head. All those things have gone. And with
I think Gerard Butler could do that.
I bet he couldn't do any of them. I bet he couldn't do any of them at all, but he can, he can show off his ripped body and go, "This is Sparta!"
We can all do that.
That's fine. Okay, so I think that Zac Efron is a throwback to an old school leading man. And in this, although it is very hard for anyone to be up against Christian McKay because he is dominating the screen, because he's Welles. Because Welles, anyway, is a larger-than-life character who created myths about himself, and all the stories that he told about himself, 1 in 5 of them were true. I still think Zac Efron holds his own pretty well. Third thing is, they've shot it in the Isle of Man, and there's an awful lot of films made in the Isle of Man, and they're made there, let's be honest, for financial reasons. In the case of this, they filmed it in the Gaiety Theatre, because the Gaiety Theatre looks like the theatre that they're looking for the Mercury. And once again, it's that thing, if you get a location right, it's something about the tone of a film changes. There's something, filming on a set is one thing. Actually filming in a proper place, under a proper stage, in a proper theatre does give... All the movies that I love the best have a sense of location. I mean, you look at Local Hero, it's clearly set in that village. You look at Exorcist, it's clearly set on that street in Georgetown. In the case of this, it is set in a theatre, and you can smell the boards. Now, if I have a problem with the film, it's this.
Well, do you?
No, here we go.
Well, you said if I have a problem. I'm just asking you whether you do.
I have a problem with this.
Okay, here's the problem.
Here's the poster for it. It's a quote from Alan Frank from the Daily Star, which says, "The feel-good film of the year." Now, I like Alan, actually. I think he knows his films, I often disagree with his opinions. And I like the film as well. But calling it the feel-good film of the year is a strange thing. It's like that when Slumdog Millionaire came out. It was a feel-good film of the decade. And you go, what? The bits with the child poverty and the prostitution and the death
torture.
and torturing and people having their eyes burnt out. You can imagine people sitting there going, when do I start to feel good? And I said to Alan, I saw him at the screening, I said, what did you mean by the feel-good film of the year? And he said, well, I felt good afterwards. He said, I liked it. It was a well-done movie that did... And so actually, on one level, that what he's saying is completely right. It makes you feel good. But I think calling it the feel-good film of the year is a strange thing. However, I think it's very interesting that there will be a big audience for this movie who will go and see Zac Efron, an audience of 12-year-old girls maybe, who will go along to see Zac, who actually won't know who Orson Welles is and won't know anything about Orson Welles. And I think if they see this, they will be interested in Orson Welles. They will be interested in that very famous version of Julius Caesar. They won't know who Richard Linklater is. They won't have the back catalogue of Slacker. I think that Linklater's point about Orson Welles actually being an independent director, despite the fact that he worked within the Hollywood system, although he was so abused by it, is completely legitimate. And you know what? I've now seen this 3 times. Not because I think it's a rip-roaring, tear-away, no-holds-barred success film of the year, but it's a really solid piece of work, and it holds up to subsequent viewings.